Joining me live in our Lagos studio to discuss this is News Central's Bernard Akede, who's been closely monitoring the situation in Niger since the coup happened. One welcome to you, Bernard, and thanks for joining us on NCP Continental Prime.
Thanks for having me, Gbenga.
Now, Bernard, before the coup, we've had coups in the West Africa region for the past few years. There's been a coup in Guinea, Mali, and Burkina Faso. And a lot of people have used the term toothless bulldog to describe ECOWAS. There was also a failed ultimatum that expired on Sunday where the ECOWAS leadership, led by Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, threatened military intervention should the junta not restore to constitutional order this Monday, but we've seen what happened. Now, with the new leadership chaired by Nigeria's Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the ECOWAS leadership met yesterday and, they did activate and say, look, immediately the ECOWAS standby force should go into Niger and restore constitutional order. Would you say the ECOWAS under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has, changed the toga of toothless bulldog, and is ECOWAS more decisive and responsive to safeguarding democracy in the West Africa? So, Bridget.
Gbenga, you're totally correct. ECOWAS has been called all sorts, toothless bulldog. Even they've been said to have all barks and no bites, and that's because of the kind of things that have been happening with the West African bloc in the past few years. But President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, after taking charge of ECOWAS, or immediately taking charge, did say that he's going to look into several things. First of all, ensure that democracy is restored into parts of West Africa where the military have taken over. Ensure that the economy of the sub-region also improves, and ensure that there's proper bilateral trade and interconnectivity between these countries. So it's a good chance for him and for ECOWAS in general to prove that things are better, that the group is now getting towards better days, so to speak. But then again, some have also said it's a baptism of fire. Not long after he made that statement while becoming the chairperson of ECOWAS, he's met with a coup in one of the member countries. So there is a lot for him to do to be able to prove that ECOWAS truly is heading back to its glory days, particularly the kind of days that ECOWAS had in the 90s when ECOMOG, which is the military arm of ECOWAS, was able to go into certain West African countries and restore sanity to those particular countries, being reminded of countries like Sierra Leone and Liberia in particular. And again, remember that Nigerian contingents who were part of ECOMOG did have very good outings back in those days. But after that, the glory days of ECOWAS seems to have faded away. So again, it's left to be seen if President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will be able to restore ECOWAS to its past glory.
Thank you, Bernard. Now, Bernard, there's a big elephant in the room, and if you've been following events in the last few years, you would notice there's a certain pattern when these coups happen. A lot of the governments there's a lot of anti-French sentiment amongst the populace. They seem to protest against France, and the governments also cut off all sorts of relationships and bilateral relationships with France. Now, is it time for France to finally let go of its former colonies and stronghold in West Africa, seeing the growing popularity it seems to be receiving these days?
Well, I don't think that France, just like many other countries who have ties with their, should I say, colonial masters, so to speak, can entirely let go of the kind of relationship that they have. Bearing in mind that they speak the same language, they spend similar currencies, or at least there's similarity in the currency. There's a lot of trade and commerce going on between both countries. As a matter of fact, some have argued that of all the African countries that are colonies to European countries, the Francophone countries are the ones that are really, really being held by their former colonial masters, to use that term. But again, like you also clearly mentioned, with the string of events that have unfolded in the past few years, in Guinea, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and now, of course, in Niger, totally letting go may not be the term that we'll be using here. But
would you suggest a sort of review of the relationship?
Exactly. You know, soft pedal in certain things, review the relationship, make things a bit easier for these so-called former colonies. There's so much control, you know, directly and indirectly from France that is beginning to tell on these countries. You only need to visit one of these countries and you see how French-like they are. Some even say they are more French than the French. So there has to be some kind of reduced control so that these countries can breathe and can have better relationships, not just with France, but with their own West African neighbors and beyond. You know, let them see what they can actually achieve and do on their own.
Thank you very much. Bernard Akede, it was a pleasure speaking with you. I do appreciate your time and insight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.